All right, welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to tackle something that I honestly don't know a whole lot about.
Okay.
Firearms. How they actually work.
Yeah.
On the inside, we've got manuals, safety guides, historical documents, all kinds of stuff.
Right.
To help us really understand
Yeah.
these complex mechanisms.
What's fascinating is that even though,
Right.
firearms are incredibly powerful, they operate on these really elegant, mechanical principles.
That's a good point. So no matter what your stance is on the whole gun debate,
Right.
just understanding how these machines work,
Yeah.
it's got to be good knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it might surprise you how much engineering has actually gone into developing these mechanisms over the centuries.
I'm ready to have my mind blown.
All right.
I always thought of a gun
as
basically a tube, stick a bullet in it, pull the trigger. But I'm guessing it's way more complicated than that.
You're right. There's a lot more to it.
Okay.
At the heart of every firearm is something called the action.
The action.
Yeah. It's the mechanism that loads, fires, and ejects those cartridges.
Okay.
And believe it or not, there are actually
Six. Okay, we're diving deep already.
6 main types of actions.
Okay, where do we even begin with this?
Well, we could start with the oldest type,
Okay.
the muzzle loader.
Okay.
And we can kind of trace the evolution of firearm technology from there all the way to modern semi-automatics. Imagine going from manually pouring gunpowder down the barrel to having a mechanism that automatically reloads after each shot. That's pretty remarkable.
That really puts things in perspective.
Yeah.
So walk us through these 6 action types.
All right. So you've got muzzle loaders.
Okay.
Which, as the name suggests, are loaded from the muzzle, the front of the barrel. Okay. So think of those classic muskets used in the Revolutionary War.
Okay.
Then you have hinge actions, which break open like a door for loading.
Okay.
Much like the double-barrel shotguns you see in old Western movies.
Those always looked so cool.
Right. Now, bolt actions use a rotating bolt to lock and unlock the breech.
Okay.
Popular in hunting rifles for their accuracy and reliability.
Right.
Lever actions, on the other hand, employ a lever often below the receiver to cycle the action.
All right.
And that kind of gives them that,
Basic,
iconic Western feel.
Yeah.
And then there's the pump action, where a sliding forearm is used to cycle the action.
Ah, like a shotgun.
Shotguns.
Yeah. I can practically hear the sound effect.
Yeah, it's very recognizable.
Right.
And finally, we come to the semi-automatic action, which harnesses the energy from a fired cartridge to automatically eject the spent casing and load a fresh one from a magazine.
So it does the reloading for you?
It does.
That sounds efficient.
Exactly. Semi-automatics allow for a faster rate of fire, which has had significant implications, for warfare. And of course, has sparked a lot of debate around gun control.
That makes sense. So much history and engineering in these little mechanisms. Now, out of these 6, are there any that you find particularly fascinating?
Honestly, they're all fascinating in their own way. Yeah. But I do find the evolution from that simple muzzle loader to the complex semi-automatic to be quite remarkable. Yeah. It really speaks to human ingenuity and our constant drive to improve upon existing technologies.
I totally agree. But let's bring it down to a more personal level, right? Yeah. We've all seen handguns, in movies, the news, maybe even in real life.
Yeah.
Are those using just one of these 6 actions, or are there separate types just for handguns?
Good question. When it comes to handguns, the 2 most common action types are revolvers and semi-automatics. Occasionally you'll find some less common ones like hinge or bolt actions, but those are kind of the exceptions, not the rule.
Okay, revolver versus semi-automatic.
Right.
Help us picture those key differences.
Okay. So picture a revolver, right?
Okay.
It has that iconic revolving cylinder, like a miniature carousel, holding multiple cartridges.
Yeah.
Each time the action cycles, that cylinder rotates, lining up the next chamber with the barrel.
So each chamber gets its turn to fire.
Exactly.
Interesting. Wow. And the semi-automatic handguns, how are those different?
Semi-automatic pistols, on the other hand, use a magazine that feeds cartridges into the chamber.
All right.
After each shot, the action ejects the empty shell and automatically loads a fresh round from the magazine, just like those semi-automatic rifles we talked about earlier.
Ah, so the magazine is key here.
It is.
So that means a revolver has a more limited capacity, whereas the semi-automatic could hold more in its detachable magazine.
That's one of the key distinctions between the two types. And here's a little trivia for you.
Okay.
Revolver cylinders can rotate either clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on the manufacturer.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much variation there is, even within these two main types.
Right.
But let's get even more granular. What about triggers and safeties?
Yeah.
Those seem like pretty crucial elements.
Absolutely. And they can be quite nuanced. Let's start with triggers.
Okay.
There are three main types: single action, double action, and double action only.
Okay. Lay it on me. What are the key differences?
Yeah. All right. With single action triggers, you have to manually cock the hammer before firing. Think of it like setting a mousetrap, you know?
Okay. Yeah.
You prime it. Then a light touch on the trigger releases the trap.
Yeah.
In this case, pulling the trigger only releases the hammer to strike the firing pin.
Ah, that's a great analogy. So it's a two-step process.
It is.
Cock the hammer, then pull the trigger. What about double action?
Double action triggers do it all in one pull.
Okay.
You pull the trigger, and it both cocks and releases the hammer, striking the firing pin.
So it's like a combo move.
It is. It is.
And what about the double action only?
Yeah.
Is that like a double action?
Not quite. Double action only triggers always operate in double action mode.
Okay.
So you can't cock the hammer separately.
Okay.
Each pull of the trigger both cocks and releases the hammer.
Got it. So single action is the two-stepper.
Right.
Double action does it all at once. And double action only is always double action. What a mouthful.
It is. It is.
But super interesting.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about those all-important safeties.
Okay.
I'm assuming these are designed to prevent those oops moments, right?
Precisely. Safeties are crucial for preventing accidental discharges. Yeah. But here's the thing.
Okay.
They're mechanical devices.
Right.
And like any machine, they can fail.
Oh.
So a hard knock or improper handling can still cause a firearm to fire.
Yeah.
Even if the safety is on.
That's unsettling. So it's a reminder that safeties are just one layer of protection, not a guarantee.
Exactly. Safe handling practices are paramount, no matter what.
So what kinds of safeties are out there?
Oh.
Okay, we're talking like a simple on-off switch?
There are actually two main categories.
Okay.
Manual safeties and built-in safeties. Manual safeties are the ones you actively engage or disengage.
Okay.
Like a lever on the side of the gun or a lock near the hammer.
Okay, so you physically flip a switch or turn a key.
You got it.
What about those built-in ones?
Built-in safeties are more passive.
Okay.
They're designed to prevent unintentional firing without you needing to do anything.
Yeah.
Things like decocking levers,
which
lower the hammer without firing the gun.
Right.
Trigger safeties that require a specific pressure or motion to activate, and grip safeties that only allow the gun to fire if you're gripping it properly.
Wow, they really thought of everything. It seems like gun manufacturers are serious about minimizing accidental discharges.
They are, and they've come a long way.
Yeah.
You know, on many older revolvers, the firing pin could actually rest directly on the primer of a loaded cartridge, even when the hammer was down.
Oh, wow.
So a sharp bump could actually set the gun off.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
I'm glad they've improved on that design.
Me too.
Yeah.
Most modern revolvers have features like hammer blocks or transfer bars, which prevent the firing pin from contacting the primer unless you fully pull the trigger.
Okay. Phew. That's a relief.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to see how safety technology has evolved.
It has.
Now, speaking of safety, I'm guessing there's a right way and a wrong way.
You bet.
To load and unload these things, right?
Loading and unloading procedures are absolutely critical for safe firearm handling.
Yeah.
Remember, safety isn't about luck. It's about consistent disciplined practice.
So what are the golden rules?
Okay. There are two key acronyms to remember.
Okay.
ACTS and PROVE.
Okay.
ACTS stands for Assume, Control, Trigger.
Okay.
See.
Right.
These are the 4 core safety principles.
All right, I like the sound of that.
Yeah.
Let's unpack ACTS. What does assume mean?
All right. Assume means assume every firearm is loaded always.
Okay.
Even if you've just checked it yourself, treat every firearm as if it's ready to fire.
Got it. Never let your guard down. What about control?
Control is all about muzzle direction.
Okay.
Always keep the firearm pointed in a safe direction.
Right.
Never towards yourself or anyone else,
right.
no matter what you're doing with it.
Muzzle awareness at all times.
Yeah.
Okay, what does trigger refer to?
Trigger is pretty straightforward. Keep your finger off the trigger and outside the trigger guard until you're actually ready to shoot.
Simple but essential. And finally, what about C?
C means to visually confirm that the firearm is unloaded.
Okay.
And that's where the PROV acronym comes in.
Okay, so ACTS covers the general safety principles.
Right.
And PROV is the specific procedure for unloading.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm ready to learn how to prove it. So what is it?
PROV stands for point, remove, observe, verify, examine. It's a 5-step process.
Okay, walk me through it. What's the first step?
Always point the firearm in the safest available direction.
Okay.
This should be maintained throughout the entire unloading process.
Point in the safe direction.
Yep.
Finger off the trigger. What's next?
Next is remove.
Okay.
Remove all ammunition sources.
All right.
If the firearm has a detachable magazine, take that out first.
Okay.
Then open the action
and
remove any cartridges from the chamber.
Got it.
Keep the action open for the rest of the procedure.
Remove the ammo, then any chambered round.
Exactly.
Got it. What comes after that?
Now it's time to observe.
Observe.
Visually inspect the chamber to make sure it's empty.
So look inside to double check.
Exactly.
Just to be sure.
Then you verify that the feeding path is clear.
Okay.
This means checking the magazine well, cylinder on a revolver, or any other area where a cartridge might be hiding.
So no sneaky cartridges lurking anywhere.
Exactly. Finally, examine the bore for any obstructions.
Right.
Ideally, you do this from the breech end, if possible.
Okay.
But if not, just make absolutely sure the firearm is unloaded.
Right.
And the action is open. Before looking down the barrel from the muzzle end.
Okay, so PRU is basically a 5-point safety check.
It is.
Point safe.
Yep.
Remove ammo. Observe the chamber.
Right.
Verify the feeding path.
Yep.
And examine the bore. Simple enough.
Right.
But I imagine things get a little trickier depending on the type of firearm.
You're right. The basic principles of PROV apply to all firearms, but the specific steps can vary a bit depending on the action type.
Let's get into the nitty-gritty then. What are the key things to know about loading and unloading different types of handguns?
Let's start with revolvers.
Okay.
Remember, there are a few different types.
Right, the ones with the cool swing cylinders?
Including single-action non-swing-out cylinders,
okay,
double-action swing-out cylinders, and break-open revolvers.
Okay, how do you safely unload those?
Well, for single-action non-swing-out cylinders, you'll usually find a loading gate on the side.
Okay.
Open this gate and rotate the cylinder, visually inspecting each chamber to make sure it's empty.
Right.
If there's a cartridge in there, you'll use the ejector rod under the barrel to remove it.
So it's a very careful process of checking each chamber one by one.
But with double action swing-out cylinders, things are a bit easier.
Okay.
You release the cylinder, letting it swing out to the side. Then you can use the ejector rod to pop out all the cartridges at once.
Oh, that sounds much more efficient.
It is.
What about break-open revolvers?
Break-open revolvers hinge open either at the top or the bottom.
Okay.
When you open the action, the cartridges are right there, easy to remove.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
So different types of revolvers, but the core principle of PROV
still applies.
Still applies.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears and talk about unloading semi-automatic pistols.
Those are the ones with the detachable magazines.
You got it.
Okay.
First, you always want to remove the magazine.
Okay.
Then, with your finger off the trigger, pointing the gun in a safe direction, you rack the slide rearward to eject any round that might be in the chamber.
Okay, so remove the magazine, then rack the slide.
Exactly.
Easy peasy.
And once you've done those two things, you can visually inspect the chamber to make sure it's empty.
Right.
And then lock the slide open.
Okay.
If your pistol has that feature.
Okay, so similar concept, but with that extra step of removing the mag first.
Right.
What happens if, despite all these precautions, something goes wrong? Okay. Like what if the gun malfunctions?
That's a great question, and one we'll dive into more deeply next time.
Okay, stay tuned.
Stay tuned.
All right. So we were just getting into firearm malfunctions.
Yeah.
It's not something you want to think about.
Right.
But knowing what to do if a gun jams could be crucial.
Absolutely. It's always better to be prepared for the unexpected. Right. And while modern firearms are generally very reliable, malfunctions can happen.
So what causes these malfunctions? Is it always user error?
It can definitely be both.
Okay.
Sometimes it's a simple matter of wear and tear.
Okay.
Parts can break, springs can weaken. Yeah.
Tolerances can shift over time.
Okay.
This is why regular cleaning and maintenance is so important.
It's like a car.
Exactly.
If you don't keep up with the maintenance, things are bound to go wrong eventually.
But other times, malfunctions can be caused by things like faulty ammunition, dirt or debris in the action, or even extreme weather conditions.
So it's not always about the user messing up. Sometimes it's just bad luck.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's say a malfunction does occur.
Okay.
What are some of the common?
Well, one of the most common and honestly frustrating malfunctions is a failure to fire.
A failure to fire.
Yeah, this simply means that the gun doesn't go off when you pull the trigger.
I can imagine that would be terrifying.
Yeah, in a high-pressure situation.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what causes that to happen?
It could be a few things. A bad primer in the cartridge.
Right. A light hammer strike. Right. Or even a mechanical issue with the firing pin.
So it's like the gun's version of a misfire.
It is. It is.
What about other types of malfunctions?
Another common one is a failure to feed.
A failure to feed.
Yeah, where a new round doesn't properly load into the chamber.
Okay.
This can be caused by a weak magazine spring, a damaged cartridge, or even just dirt in the action.
So the gun basically jams up.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, and then
you've got the stovepipe malfunction.
Stovepipe malfunction.
Which is pretty easy to visualize.
Okay.
It happens when a spent casing gets stuck halfway out of the ejection port.
Oh, okay.
Looking like a stovepipe sticking out.
Yeah, I've seen that in movies. Yeah. That's got to be annoying.
It can be.
What causes that?
That's often caused by something called limp wristing. Yeah, which means not holding the gun firmly enough during firing.
Right.
Causing the slide to short stroke.
So proper grip is really important.
It is.
Okay.
And speaking of things getting stuck. There's also the dreaded double feed.
Double feed.
Where 2 rounds try to load into the chamber.
Oh, wow.
At the same time.
Okay.
That sounds bad.
That sounds like a serious jam.
It is. Double feeds can be a bit tricky to clear.
Okay.
And often involve manipulating the magazine, the slide, and even the cartridges themselves.
This all sounds pretty intense.
Yeah.
So let's say you're in a situation where you experience a malfunction.
Yeah.
What's the first thing you should do?
Okay, so the most important thing is to stay calm and keep the firearm pointed in a safe direction.
Okay.
Don't immediately try to fix it yourself,
right?
Especially if you're not familiar with the specific firearm.
So, safety first. Don't panic. What's next?
Depending on the situation and your comfort level, you might try to clear the malfunction yourself.
Okay.
There's a handy acronym to remember. TAP, R-A-C-K.
TAP, R-A-C-K. Okay, I like the sound of this. Break it down for me.
All right, so TAP means tap the bottom of the magazine to make sure it's seated properly.
Okay.
R-A-C-K means rack the slide to eject that malfunctioning round.
Right.
And chamber a fresh one.
Right. Got it.
That seems pretty straightforward.
It is.
Okay.
And it's surprisingly effective for clearing many common malfunctions. However, it is important to remember that this is just a general guideline.
Okay. So what else should people keep in mind?
The specific steps for clearing a malfunction can vary depending on the type of firearm and the specific
issue you're encountering.
Okay.
So it's always best to consult your firearms manual for detailed instructions.
The manual is your best friend.
It is.
In these situations.
Think of it like a troubleshooting guide for your gun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is all super helpful, but I have to admit, even after learning so much about firearms, I still feel like there's a lot of misconceptions out there.
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Firearms are often shrouded in myths and misconceptions.
Right. Fueled by movies, the media.
Yeah.
Just a general lack of understanding.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So let's bust some myths.
Okay.
What are some of the most common misconceptions you encounter?
One of the biggest ones is that guns are inherently evil.
Right.
Or guns kill people.
Yeah.
It's a very simplistic view that ignores a lot of nuance.
Right.
Firearms are tools.
Right.
And like any tool, they can be used for good or for evil.
Yeah.
It's the person behind the tool that ultimately determines...
It's about personal responsibility.
Exactly.
Not demonizing the object itself.
Another common misconception is that a bigger gun is always better.
Right.
In reality.
Yeah.
The best firearm for any given situation depends on a ton of factors.
Yeah.
The intended the user's experience and comfort level, even legal restrictions.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all.
Not at all. And then there's the myth that you can't miss with a shotgun.
Right.
While shotguns do fire a spread of pellets, they still require accuracy and proper aiming.
Okay.
You know, the spread only becomes a factor at longer distances.
So Hollywood has been lying to us.
In many ways, yes. Okay. Another misconception is about silencers or suppressors, as they're more accurately called. People think they make guns completely silent.
Right, like in the movies.
Like in the movies.
Yeah.
In reality, they reduce the noise, but they don't eliminate it entirely.
So it's more about bringing the sound down to a manageable level.
Exactly.
Not making it disappear completely.
And finally, there's the dangerous misconception that anyone can handle a gun.
Right.
This is simply not true.
Right.
Safe and responsible firearm handling requires knowledge, skill, and practice.
It's like driving a car.
Exactly.
You wouldn't just hop behind the wheel with no instruction.
Firearm ownership and use is a serious responsibility that should never be taken lightly.
You've definitely shed some light on those common misconceptions. Yeah. So important to separate fact from fiction.
Absolutely. Informed decision-making and responsible behavior are essential for ensuring everyone's safety.
This has been a truly fascinating deep dive.
It has been.
We've covered so much ground today.
We have.
From the basic mechanics to the nuances of safe handling and even debunking some common myths.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure sharing this knowledge. Understanding the ins and outs of firearms is a crucial step towards responsible ownership and use.
So what are your final thoughts for our listeners as we wrap up?
My main takeaway is that knowledge is power.
Okay.
The more you understand about firearms, the better equipped you'll be to make informed decisions and stay safe. Whether you're considering firearm ownership, participating in shooting sports, or simply want to be more informed. Take the time to educate yourself. Seek out reputable sources of information. Consult with qualified instructors. And always practice safe handling techniques.
Excellent advice. Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive. I don't know about you, but I feel a lot more informed. And maybe even a little bit awestruck by the ingenuity of these machines.
And hopefully you, our listener, share that sense of knowledge and respect.
Absolutely.
Remember, firearms are powerful tools that demand responsible handling.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Good.
And as we always say here on the deep dive, stay curious. Keep learning.
Keep learning.
And above all, stay safe.
Stay safe.
Until next time.
Until next time.
Happy exploring.
Happy exploring.
Wow, we really went deep on that one. I feel like I've gone through a whole firearms training course condensed into one episode.
It's definitely been a thorough exploration, and hopefully you feel more informed, listener.
I definitely do. But before we wrap up completely, let's take a moment to kind of crystallize some of those key takeaways. If someone only remembers a few things from this deep dive, what should they be?
I'd say the absolute must-knows boil down to this. First, really understand the action type of the firearm you're handling, whether it's a revolver, a semi-automatic, or something else. Each one has its quirks and requires a specific approach.
Right. Knowing whether it has a revolving cylinder or a magazine makes a big difference.
Second, you absolutely have to know how to operate the safety mechanisms on that particular firearm. Where are those safeties located? How do you engage and disengage them?
And remembering that safeties aren't foolproof.
Right.
They can fail, so safe handling practices are always paramount.
Exactly. That leads us to the third must-know. Mastering the procedures for loading and unloading that firearm. This is where those handy acronyms ACTS and PREV come in.
Those are seriously catchy. It's like they were designed to be drilled into your brain for safety.
They were. Assume every firearm is loaded, control the muzzle, keep your finger off the trigger, and see that it's unloaded. And then, of course, use those provy steps. Point in a safe direction, remove all ammo sources, observe the chamber, verify the feeding path, and examine the bore.
It's a lot to remember, but practicing those steps meticulously every single time you handle a firearm is crucial.
Couldn't agree more. Consistent, disciplined practice is the key to safe firearm handling. It's not about luck, it's about building those good habits.
Well said. I have to say, after this deep dive, I'm not only more informed, but also a bit in awe of the engineering and history behind firearms. It's a world I knew very little about, and now I feel like I've just scratched the surface.
There's always more to learn. What aspects intrigued you the most, listener? Was it the evolution from muzzleloaders to semi-automatics, or maybe the variety of safety mechanisms designed to prevent those accidents?
Honestly, it was a bit of everything. Learning about the different action types, seeing how those mechanisms have developed over time, understanding the thought that goes into safety features, it's all fascinating.
I find it fascinating too, and for anyone who shares that curiosity and wants to continue exploring, there are some excellent resources available. They can provide hands-on training and personalized guidance.
Absolutely. Learning from experienced professionals is invaluable, especially when it comes to something as potentially dangerous as firearms.
You're right. It's always best to seek expert advice and training before handling any firearm.
Well, folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of firearms. It's been an eye-opening journey for me, and I hope it has been for you too. Remember, knowledge is power, especially when it comes to safety.
Stay curious, keep learning, and above all, stay safe.